Now, I had a bit of bad luck the last time I tried to do this on the Earth Live lesson site. Unfortunately, my restreaming software didn't work, so it didn't come through to here. So if any of you are out there and could just super quickly send me a message, let me know that this is up and on the right website, that would be absolutely amazing. I am also simultaneously going to be broadcasting to my website, but on a totally different restreaming system, so hopefully that should not make any difference. Any comments yet? Anyone out there? Anybody care to send something through? Let me know that you're listening and that this is working. Yes! Hooray! Thank you very much to Lizzie and also to Emily D as well. That's great news. Right, so where shall I get started? I started my life in expeditions in, I guess, my late teens, doing it, as a career, as a job. But I started learning the whole process of expeditions far, far earlier than that. I started in the Scouts and in the Duke of Edinburgh when I was 12 years old, and many of the skills that I learnt then are the ones that I now use every single day when I'm on expedition. But let me fast forward to my late teens and my first big expeditions and how I got them started and how that could help you guys if you want to be thinking about planning your own expeditions as well. I understand that right now the far-flung parts of the world seem even further away than they have done in the past, but all of this will end sometime, and we are going to get a chance to go back out on big adventures at some time in the future. So why not spend some of your time on lockdown planning, dreaming, fantasizing about the awesome places that you could potentially go to. So I think the first priority has to be funding. If you read the works of Ernest Shackleton, then you'll see that he considers gathering sponsorship, gathering funding to be the biggest task of all, a bigger task than the expeditions themselves. And I have to say that with over 20 years of experience doing this, I wholeheartedly concur. It is so difficult getting anybody else to pay for your expeditions, almost near enough impossible. To begin with, when I first got started, I was just funding myself completely. So my first expeditions to the most far-flung parts of Indonesia was solely funded by me working in bars and nightclubs and restaurants, and allowed me in the early 1990s to go away on my own for about 9 months and went to some truly extraordinary places. One of those was Timor in eastern Indonesia, and I brought back this, which is one of my favourite artefacts to this day. It's a little bit ghoulish because this is a genuine headhunter's mask, and these would have been worn by the men of the tribe to obscure their identity when they went out on headhunting raids to try and capture the women from other villages, and sometimes to take their children as well. So it's a bit grisly, but that's been in my possession for 30 odd years, and I absolutely love it. So those were completely self-funded, but then a little bit later on I started working for a company called The Rough Guides as a travel guidebook writer, and also doing freelance journalism as well. And that enabled me to lead my first ever proper expedition, which was in the late 1990s, in 1997. And I attempted to walk solo across New Guinea. I have to say I was massively unprepared, and it failed spectacularly. But I learned so many lessons from the mistakes that I made on that very first expedition. I have here, actually, I just found this under the house today. This is the very first article that I got published in a national newspaper when I was, I guess, in my late teens, early 20s. So this is from the late 1990s, and this was from the expedition that I did in New Guinea, attempting to walk across the island. I was there for about 3 months, completely on my own. I have never been more lonely, more frightened, more feeling afraid than I was in those months. And although it did fail, and it failed pretty badly, I learned so much about how you have to plan and prepare an expedition in those months of failure. That's one of the reasons why I think that self-funding is a really good way to start, because you don't have that pressure on you that you have to bring something back, that you have to bring back film and footage, that you have to achieve your ultimate goal. And that brings me on to the next stage of trying to funding an expedition, which is sponsorship. Now, the holy grail of any expedition sponsorship is just managing to get some big flash company to give you tens of thousands of pounds to go off and do the expedition of your dreams. In over 20 years, nearly 30 years actually of doing this for a living, I've managed that 3 times. And that is as someone who is, in the public eye and, at very least can get meetings with all the people that I want to get. It is so hard. And essentially what you need to crack is convincing some big company that they have something to gain from you going off and doing your big, bold expedition to some far-flung part of the world. And how do you do that? How do you convince some car manufacturer here in the UK that what you're doing is of any benefit to them? It's very hard. As an idea, one of the only successful ones that I ever had was I did the Marathon des Sables back in 2005, which was then known as the toughest race in the world, 160 miles across the Sahara Desert. Not an expedition as such, but, it's a race, but I did manage to get that funded. And the way I got it funded was by approaching a computer company and convincing them that the best way of testing one of their bits of hardware was to have it go through this incredibly grueling process of sand and sand dunes and heat, and that when it came back it would have been tested to the limits of its endurance, and therefore would they be able to put that into their marketing. As it happened, it completely broke. The sand got into this bit of electronic equipment and it didn't work when they brought it back. So from their perspective, it was a total waste of money. But for me, it was really good. I also managed to get, so I did some films and some talks for them as well, and I managed to get a camera and an edit suite from the money that they gave me. But like I said, that is a really, really difficult one. Cracking corporate sponsorship is such hard work. You can approach some of the organisations that offer grants. There are many out there nowadays. Here in this country, the Scientific Exploration Society offers grants. The Royal Geographical Society offers grants. The National Geographic offers grants. But you have to have a proposal that has something unique and something that is going to truly capture their attention. I spent 5 years working for the National Geographic, and I could say without an ounce of exaggeration that we received a pitch for someone to get to go and climb Everest or do the 7 summits or paddle the length of the Amazon 2 or 3 times a week. And you just put them straight in the bin, because why? My boss used to say to me over and over again, I'm not paying for someone to go on their holidays and go and do the things that they enjoy for fun. You kind of need to come up with something unusual, or at very least there needs to be a spin on it, there needs to be a twist, there needs to be some reason as to why now, why you, and why this is new. If you can crack all those things, then you do stand a chance of getting yourself funded. But like I say, funding is the most difficult part of trying to get an expedition off the ground, bar none. Your next step is finding an expedition. That's why I've sat in front of this map here. What I haven't told you is that the only place in my house that has a giant map like this is the playroom. Well, not the playroom, it's where Logan sleeps. So essentially my laptop is now propped up on his cot, and I'm surrounded by cuddly toys, sat perched in amongst his all of his ball pit and stuff. So if there's some banging on the door and some screaming outside, it's him waiting to be let in. What was I talking about? Yeah, finding your expedition. So this is absolutely critical, and there are lots of modern methods that are on hand that I didn't have when I started out in the early 1990s trying to find expeditions. The way I did it was the good old-fashioned way, which was research. So I still have here my old diaries and contacts and books dating back to the late 1980s, which are full of names, dates, places. Look at all this stuff. This is all writing down things that I'm preparing in case I might want to go back and do another expedition at some time in the future. Many of these I've kept in contact with for decades. So if any of you saw Expedition on UK TV or on the BBC, you would have seen the expeditions that we did in Suriname. The contacts that made that possible, I set up in 1997, 1998, and I was still keeping in contact with them every month since then to make this happen. People essentially are the critical bit. People that have the knowledge, have the experience, who are there on the ground and who understand the nations better than anywhere else. They are the critical bit to making these expeditions happen. So for example, on Expedition, when we were looking into trying to make the first ever descent of a canyon in Oman in the Middle East, I got the book on the canyons of the Middle East, and I found out the guy who wrote it, Khalid, and I got in touch with him and I set up a dialogue and a conversation and eventually a friendship. Critically, he had to be a part of our team because, you know, if he was going to give us some information that led to a totally new canyon, one that had never been explored before, he needed to be on it. That information is gold dust, and anyone who is in the explorer's world will guard it so jealously because, you know, these places are becoming so much harder to find, and obviously the knowledge of where they are is everything. So get in touch with the right people, do all your research, find the right contacts. Google Earth is more and more becoming a tool for people to find expeditions on. So I'm sure some of you will have seen the Google Earth forest that was found in Mozambique, I think, on Google Earth. It's a terrific tool. Learn to use it properly because there are so many layers to it. And one of the things when we were looking in Suriname to try and find rivers that weren't mapped and weren't explored was looking at successive layers back through time. So you take one particular chunk of, in this case, a mountainous region of Suriname, which is covered in jungle, covered in rainforest, super remote, no villages for hundreds of miles around in every direction, and then go back through that same section over successive months and years, because things change over the course of a year. You know, you get wet seasons and dry seasons. And what we were looking for was, in amongst the trees, a glint of gold that suggested there was water below, so it's sunlight reflecting off rivers. And when we found that, and then compared it to existing maps, we found endless waterways that simply did not exist, that were not mapped in any way, but they were there. They were definitely there. You could see them on Google Earth. And using that, we managed to spend nearly 6 weeks on rivers that were totally unmapped. We got to name them ourselves. And even to have the extraordinary possibility of paddling out of the rainforest to see a waterfall that didn't occur on any map, that none of the nearest local people had any idea existed, and was over 100 meters in height, stretching out through the forest on every side. We check later on, this is another thing that's critically important, check with the exploration societies, the geographical societies that administer the place that you're going to, and, you know, just make sure that you do all your homework, because it's really bad form to claim that you've been the first to see something when you definitely haven't. In this case, we did all our homework, and we were the first people to see that waterfall, and we had the privilege of naming it now in this time and age and generation. I mean, that just blows my mind. The next thing, I guess, would be choice of exploit, for want of a better word. There are certain things that yield better results than others, and I would say that in this day and age, if you really want to be an explorer and you really want to go places that no one has been to before, you want to be a caver, and even better, a cave diver. So in all the years that we've been doing cave exploration, we've uncovered miles and miles of cave passage that has never been illuminated in tens of millions of years. And, you know, The vast majority of it is in karst, so limestone, mountainous limestone formations that have trickle down caverns running through them. Sometimes they're flooded, sometimes they're not, and particularly karst that is in rainforest, the two of them together. It's a horrible environment to work in. It can be really, really testing, but the central spine of New Guinea, where we've done many of our expeditions in the past, you can fly over it for hours and hours and hours and look down on mountains that are peppered with caves. They're there, and almost none of them have been explored before. And there will be discoveries, not just for the next generation, but for the generation after that. There'll be people wandering into caverns in places like New Guinea and New Britain that are many times bigger than St. Paul's Cathedral and never seen before by another human being. And if I have any other message to get across, I guess it's that. It's, I was crushed as a kid to think that all of the old-fashioned exploration had been done many years ago, and that would never be my reality. But the truth is, there's still so much left to do. On expedition, we ran an unrun river in the Himalayas, probably the last unrun river in Bhutan, a whitewater river. We ran rivers in the jungle where nobody has been in modern times. We dove through passageway in the Yucatan, which is miles away from Cancun and Tulum and Playa del Carmen, where millions of people, literally millions, go on their holidays, and we were swimming through the most stunning cave passages and knowing that we were the first people ever to see them. And standing on mountains in Greenland, looking out to the horizon, knowing almost every mountain we could see had never been climbed before, and that there was still generations left of exploration to be done. Okay, I could witter on for hours about this. This kind of is my favourite topic. I just, super quick, I hate doing this, but I should say, if you want to learn any more, I have got this book out. The television series is re-showing on UK TV Dave at the moment. That is Sunday evenings. Oh, so it's today, Sunday evening. It'll be on. Plus, there's also an audio book, and this is coming out in paperback soon as well. So, right, let's move on to some questions. Charlie Woodford, when preparing and researching, do you ever feel ready, or do you get to the point where you just get on your way? Can you overthink an expedition? Oh, you have. I'm guessing from that question that you have been on some expeditions, Charlie, because you absolutely hit the nail on the head. The first descent of the Barlim River in New Guinea, I started trying to get that off the ground in 1997, and we attempted it in 2017. By the time we got round to doing it, I had thought through every single rapid 1,000 times over, and my mind was ready to blow. The exact opposite of that was when we were doing expeditions. Sometimes we'd do a 6-week trip. I'd be home for a couple of weeks, during which period I had, a tiny baby and a wife who'd basically been without me and was, just wanting to stick him onto me for a little while. And we didn't get anything like enough preparation, but that's not the norm. Ollie Jelly, so where's next then? Right now I am supposed to be on a first whitewater descent expedition. Can't tell you where, highly secret, but obviously that is very, very much on hold and will be for a long time, unfortunately. Zoe Welfare, I've just completed my Gold DV, but the presentation was cancelled. I was going to be presenting at the Gold DV, and sadly, I'm so sorry that you don't get that glorious day. I've presented it many, many times, and it is absolutely brilliant. But Zoe, well done. You have obviously worked so hard to get that, and I'm really sorry that you don't get a chance to do it now. Any places in the UK you suggest going to for expeditions? So obviously on lockdown at the moment, that's not possible, but when the rules start to ease up, I would go West Coast Scotland. Skye, Rum, Egg, Mull, sea kayaking, the diving there is awesome. St Kilda, if you can manage to get out there. Cape Wrath, what a name that is, Cape Wrath. Can you imagine paddling around Cape Wrath? What an expedition that would be. There's so many places that you can go to here in the UK. Paul R, what is the hardest conditions to prepare for? Extreme heat or extreme cold? Both are super easy. What's hard is jungle conditions. So the constant humidity and moisture on jungle expeditions breaks all your electrical kit. Electrical kit hates it. and it is an absolute nightmare. Lizzie's just put up a link to the expedition series on UK TV, and Tom L saying the book is incredible. Thank you very much, Tom. I didn't ask him to say that. He's not a friend of mine who's just kind of got in touch. Eco Princess, what's your favourite expedition that you've been on? Bhutan in the Himalayas is pretty tricky to beat. Stunning location. Done 2 rivers in Bhutan that have never been paddled before, and both of them blew my mind. We're getting close to our 20 minutes past when I need to be signing off. Has anyone got any last questions they'd like to ask before I sign off? A couple of people asking what my favourite expedition that I've been on is. Other than Bhutan, I would have to say that the jungle is. I have a love-hate relationship with the jungle. Places like Guyana and Venezuela and Suriname, they offer so much, and there's so much potential for exploration, and also so many incredible wildlife possibilities as well. But there's nowhere where you are so. It feels like fungus is growing on you every second. You've got chiggers, little burrowing mites beneath your fingernails and getting into your backside, leeches, ticks, fleas. And just the horrible endless humidity, your sleeping bag soaking wet. After a few months of that, it's just like water torture. It starts to drive you a little bit crazy. Annette Gresty. Okay, this is a great question to end on. So apart from hiking, paddling and map reading, what other skill should we learn? The best skills course that I have ever done is with the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering in the Indian Himalayas. It remains one of the best bargains in the world. It's still only a few £100 for a month in the Himalayas, being taught by the Indian Army how to lead an expedition, how to plan how much food you're going to need, how to structure your team, and then the skills of mountaineering. And we finished off by attempting a 6,500 metre mountain. Once all this is done, the Institutes of Mountaineering in the Indian Himalayas are just unbeatable. If you want to make yourself indispensable as an expedition team member, I would say get your medic qualifications. Those vary in sort of scope from your basic first responder and St John's Ambulance qualifications through to your MIRA and things like that. And if you have good medic qualifications, then you become indispensable. Every team needs a medic, and if you can be that person and you're also a world-class paddler, or you're also very good in the jungle, then that's an awful lot of things on your side. Right, I have very slightly started to go over length, so I'm going to sign off. There will be plenty more live lessons. Tune into them. They've been absolutely amazing. There's been loads to find out. Also, don't forget to tune into my live lesson, my biology live lesson and Q&A on Wednesday morning at 09:30. But for now, this is Stevie B saying that's it from me.